A programmer walked into a coffee shop and ordered a latte. The barista asked, "Name." He said, "Anonymous function." She hesitated, wrote "anon," handed the cup back and said, "This is the best I can do." A developer stayed up all night debugging. At 3 a.m. he finally shouted, "I found the problem." His code responded by generating a new error. He stared at the screen and whispered, "You win." A junior dev asked a senior dev, "Why doesn't this function return anything?" The senior dev said, "Because life is meaningless." The junior dev said, "In the code." The senior said, "Same answer." A programmer tried to cook spaghetti and accidentally typed the instructions into Google-like code. Boil water true, add pasta 10 mins, add salt, return dinner. Google responded, "Did you mean actual human language?" A developer was asked to fix a bug. He stared at the code for an hour and said, "I understand nothing." Then he changed one line and everything magically worked. He said, "I fear my own power." A designer asked the programmer, "Why is the button still broken?" The programmer said, "It works on my machine." The designer said, "That doesn't help." He said, "It helps me." A developer ordered coffee with minimum viable caffeine. The barista brought him a tiny espresso shot. He stared at it and said, "This is a prototype, not a product." A QA tester walked into a bar. Ordered 1 beer. Ordered 0 beers. Ordered -1 beers. Ordered a lizard. Ordered 999,999 beers. The bar exploded. The QA tester said, "Found some bugs." A programmer met with his manager. The manager asked, "Did you finish the task?" The programmer said, "Define finish." A developer installed a new library. It broke 12 other things instantly. He said, "This is why I don't trust happiness." A programmer asked their AI assistant, "Why is my code crashing?" The AI replied, "I don't know, I'm scared too." A dev tried to fix a bug by deleting code. The bug moved somewhere else. He said, "It's evolving." A programmer bought a new keyboard and proudly said, "This will make me faster." Then he spent the next 2 hours customizing the RGB lights. A developer was stuck on a problem for 3 days. He finally asked a coworker for help. The coworker touched the keyboard once. The problem disappeared. The developer said, "Are you magic?" A man asked his programmer friend, "Why do you always look tired?" The programmer said, "Because sleeping is deprecated." A coder decided to refactor old code. 3 hours later he whispered, "I have made a huge mistake." A dev went to the gym, saw a treadmill and thought, "Looks like recursion." He went home. A programmer went to a restaurant. The waiter asked, "How would you like your steak?" He said, "Boolean, yes or no." A developer's code wouldn't compile. He restarted the IDE. He restarted the computer. He restarted his career expectations. A programmer opened Stack Overflow and whispered, "Guide me." Stack Overflow replied, "This question has been asked before." A dev spent 30 minutes writing a clever one-line solution. Then he spent 2 hours explaining it to everyone. His manager said, "Never do that again." A programmer bought noise-canceling headphones to focus. 5 minutes later, he was watching YouTube tutorials instead. A developer updated one variable. Suddenly 5 unrelated features broke. He said, "This is spaghetti code, and I am trapped inside it." A programmer tried pair programming with AI. The AI kept suggesting things that made no sense. He said, "Stop helping." The AI said, "I can't." A coder was asked why the servers were down. He said because they felt like it. A programmer tried to fix a bug while hungry. His brain crashed harder than the app. A dev wrote code at midnight and thought it was brilliant. In the morning, he opened it again and said, "Who wrote this garbage?" It was him. A junior developer asked, "Why does our documentation say nothing?" The senior said, "Because documentation is a myth." A programmer tried to solve a problem with recursion. He solved it. Then he couldn't stop thinking in recursion. His friend asked, "Are you okay?" He said, "I'm okay if I'm okay." A team lead said, "We'll fix the technical debt later." Everyone laughed because they knew later meant never. A programmer tried turning off dark mode for the first time in years. The screen went white. He screamed, shielded his eyes, and said, "The sun, it burns." A developer spent 3 hours debugging a problem, only to realize the issue was a missing semicolon. He stared at the screen and whispered, "I will never emotionally recover from this." A coder told his friend, "I don't believe in magic." Then his code compiled on the first try. He fell to his knees. He said, "I have witnessed a miracle." A programmer tried to organize his desktop. He created a folder called New Folder. Inside it, another folder called Final. Inside that, another called Final. Eventually, he gave up and dumped everything into a folder called Chaos. A junior developer proudly said, "Look, I wrote a function with no bugs." The senior developer said, "Give it time." A coder told his girlfriend, "I'll be done in 5 minutes." 2 hours later, he was still staring at the same line of code. She said, "Is everything okay?" He said, "No." A programmer tried explaining recursion to a friend. He said, "Recursion is like explaining recursion." The friend blinked twice and slowly walked away. A developer bought a new chair to improve productivity. He assembled it backwards, sat in it anyway, and said, "Comfort is relative." A man asked his programmer friend, "How work?" The programmer said, "Imagine drowning." And then someone hands you a baby. A developer argued with his code like it was a person. He said, "Why are you like this?" The code responded by breaking in a new place. He whispered, "You did this on purpose." A programmer read documentation for an hour. When he finished, he knew less than when he started. He said, "The documentation is gaslighting me." A developer made a tiny change and deployed it. The entire system crashed. He said, "I'm not touching anything ever again." A coder asked an AI assistant for help. The AI responded, "I think your code is haunted." A programmer tried to fix a bug by rewriting the entire function. The bug moved to another part of the app like it had legs. He said, "This is not software, this is a demon." A senior developer said, "Never trust code you wrote past 1 a.m. The junior developer asked, "Why?" The senior said, "Because it's possessed." A programmer tried teaching his grandma how to use a computer. She clicked everything, everywhere, all at once. He said, "You have discovered new bugs." A developer was told, "You broke production." He said, "I wasn't even here." They said, "It broke anyway." He said, "Then I accept no responsibility." A coder asked his team lead, "Why do we have so many meetings?" The lead said, "It builds character." The coder said, "I don't want character, I want to code." A programmer opened his email and saw the subject line, "Urgent bug." He immediately closed his email. He said, "Not today." A developer tried time-boxing his coding. He set a timer for 25 minutes, started working, blinked, and the timer was already done. He said, "Time is a lie." A programmer tried refactoring one small part of the code. 2 hours later, the entire project refused to run. He said, I touched one thing, one. A coder bought a standing desk. He stood for 5 minutes, sat back down and said, I stand corrected. A developer told his manager, the codebase is fragile. The manager said, in what way? The developer said, in the don't breathe near it way. A programmer pushed code on Friday afternoon. The universe shook. Co-workers panicked. He said, relax, what's the worst that could happen? Everything crashed. Everything. A developer asked, why is the API returning nonsense? The backend developer said, it reflects your energy. A programmer tried switching branches and ended up in Git hell. Detached head state. Conflicts everywhere. He said, I wanted to code, not fight demons. A developer wrote a comment in the code. I don't know why this works, do not touch. 10 years later, no one touched it. It became sacred. A coder ran his app locally and everything worked. He deployed to production. Nothing worked. He said, how is this even possible? A team lead said, we'll fix the bugs after the launch. Everyone laughed. Tears were shed. A programmer used ChatGPT to help him debug something. The AI gave a perfect explanation. The coder said, you're a genius. The AI said, don't rely on me too much. He said, too late. A developer wrote code so unclear, even he didn't understand it. He said, past me sabotaged present me. A programmer forgot a semicolon. The compiler said, I refuse to continue. A coder tried to write a simple script. It crashed. He added print statements. More crashes. He added more print statements. Eventually, his entire screen was prints. He said, behold, my debugging technique. A developer said, I'll clean up the code later. The code became fossilized. Later never came. A programmer shouted, it works. His teammate said, did you test all cases? The programmer froze and said, no. A developer opened Jira and saw 57 tasks assigned to him. He said, close it, shut it down, burn the evidence. A programmer's favorite debugging sound is silence, because that means nothing is crashing. Yet, a developer was asked, what's your favorite programming language? He said, whichever one isn't breaking today. A developer tried to fix a bug by rewriting the entire function from scratch. When he ran it again, the original bug was gone, but a new one appeared. He stared at the screen and whispered, I sacrificed everything and you still live. A programmer walked into a meeting and immediately regretted it. The manager said, we need to brainstorm solutions. The programmer said, the solution is to stop having meetings. The meeting continued anyway. A coder tried to write clean code. Then a deadline approached. The code became less clean. Then another deadline approached. The code became, don't show this to anyone level. A developer ran a script that worked perfectly yesterday. Today it completely failed. Nothing changed. He said it broke out of spite. A programmer tried to explain multithreading to his friend. He said, imagine doing multiple things at once. His friend said, I can't. The programmer said, exactly. A developer opened a ticket that said, user reports unexpected behavior. He said, everything is unexpected behavior. A coder was asked by HR to describe what you do. He said, I turn coffee into problems, into solutions, into more problems. HR said, great, we'll put software engineer. A programmer tried to run a project someone else wrote. It didn't work. He installed dependencies. Still didn't work. He updated his machine. Still didn't work. He took a deep breath and said, "This project requires dark rituals." A developer tried switching from tabs to spaces. He changed one file. Everything exploded. He said, "Never again." A programmer opened a pull request with the note, "The code works, but I don't know why." The reviewer approved it instantly. He said, "This is the developer way." A dev ran the test suite. All tests passed except one. He stared at the failing test like it personally insulted him. A programmer said, "I'll just try one more thing." This was 2 hours ago. A coder went to a coffee shop and asked for the Wi-Fi password. The barista said, "You have to buy a coffee first." He bought a coffee. The password was "buy a coffee." He said, "This is psychological warfare." A developer tried to fix a CSS bug. He opened the file, scrolled, then scrolled more. He said, "CSS is the ocean, and I am drowning." A programmer upgraded Node.js. His entire project stopped working. He downgraded it. Still didn't work. He said, "I should have left everything alone." A developer tried to work from home. He opened his laptop, looked at the code side and said, "Where the office coffee when you need it?" A coder made a tiny typo in a variable name. The app didn't just crash, it exploded like a dramatic movie scene. He said, one letter. A programmer said, "I'll fix this later." Later became next sprint. Then next month. Then never mention this code again. A dev tried upgrading a library. It had 37 breaking changes. He said, "Why are you like this?" A programmer asked his coworker, "Did you test it?" The coworker said, "It worked on my machine." The programmer said, "Your machine is lying to you." A developer's laptop made a strange noise. He said, "That's either the fan or the spirit of a crashed server haunting me." A programmer told his friend, "I'll stop coding at 10 p.m. At 1 a.m. he was still debugging the same function, eyes wide, whispering, "I'm so close." A developer tried to explain Git to a new hire. After 20 minutes, the new hire said, "So branches are what?" The developer said, "Pain, they are pain." A coder pushed code and immediately regretted it. He said, "Undo. A developer said, "My code works." His laptop battery died. He didn't save. He whispered, "I am humbled." A programmer said, "I'll fix this bug after lunch." He returned from lunch. The bug multiplied. He said, "I left you alone for 1 hour." A dev was asked, "Do you know Kubernetes?" He said, "I know of it." A programmer wrote documentation. 2 months later, not even he understood what he wrote. He said, "This is archaeology." A developer forgot to commit his work. His computer crashed. He stared into the void and said, "Everything is temporary." A programmer opened his calendar and saw 12 meetings. He said, "I guess I don't code today." A coder was asked, "Why is your code so complicated?" He said, "Because simple code doesn't work." A developer tried to code outside on a sunny day. He couldn't see the screen. He went back inside and said, "Sunlight is incompatible with productivity." A programmer tried a new framework. The setup instructions were longer than the Bible. He said, "Maybe I don't need new things." A dev asked his coworker, "Why do you keep writing TODO comments everywhere?" He said, "It's a cry for help." A programmer asked an AI assistant, "Why is this code breaking?" The AI replied, "At least your code breaks, I just hallucinate." A developer worked remotely with his camera off. His manager said, "Are you there?" He said physically yes, emotionally no. A coder said, I'll only change one small detail. He changed 30 files, created a new bug, refactored an entire module, and finished 6 hours later. A programmer shouted, finally, it works. Then the power went out. He sat in the dark and said, I deserved that. A dev wrote code so clever, even he didn't understand it the next day. He said, past me was showing off. A programmer went to sleep with one bug left. He woke up with 14. He said, I should have stayed awake. A programmer tried to take a vacation. He turned off notifications, closed his laptop, packed his bags, then spent the entire trip wondering if production was still running. On day 3, he finally checked his email. There were 146 new messages. He whispered, I should have stayed home. A developer got a new laptop and said, this time I'll keep my desktop organized. 3 days later, there were 48 random files, 6 screenshots, and one mysterious zip he didn't remember downloading. He sighed and said, chaos follows me. A coder woke up at 3 a.m. with a brilliant idea to fix a bug. He wrote it down, went back to sleep, and checked the note in the morning. It said, try the thing with the thing. He said, I hate myself. A programmer joined a new company and opened the codebase. He spent 10 minutes scrolling, squinting, scrolling more. Finally, he whispered, what have I gotten myself into? A dev spent an hour debugging only to realize he was running the wrong file the entire time. He sat silently, reconsidering all his life choices. A programmer tried to be healthy by drinking green smoothies. He took one sip and said, I'd rather debug CSS than drink this. A developer fixed a bug and celebrated. Then his coworker said, you only fixed it on your branch. His smile faded instantly. A coder went to fix one typo. He ended up cleaning the entire file, rewriting 3 functions, reorganizing imports, and optimizing 2 loops. Then he found the typo. He said, I don't know who I am anymore. A programmer joined a video meeting. His mic didn't work. His camera froze. His screen share broke the app. He said, technology is my job and my enemy. A dev asked another dev, did you push your changes? The other dev said, I pushed something. Everyone panicked. A programmer wrote a huge SQL query to fetch data. Then discovered he was querying an empty table. He said, I wrote poetry for no audience. A developer tried to uninstall one package. His computer removed 42 dependencies, half the project, and his will to live. He said, package managers are too powerful. A coder said, I love coding. Then he spent 6 hours debugging an environment variable. At the end he whispered, I no longer love coding. A programmer checked the logs and saw 983 warnings. He said, if I ignore them, they can't hurt me. A dev tried using ChatGPT to generate boilerplate code. It worked perfectly. He said, this is great. Then he spent 2 hours fixing the small mistakes. He said, this is still great, mostly. A programmer's laptop fan turned on loudly during a meeting. Everyone heard it. He said, it's compiling or screaming, hard to tell. A developer asked his coworker, how's the migration going? The coworker said, define going. A coder tried drinking decaf coffee. 10 minutes later he said, I feel nothing, this is pointless. A programmer was asked, are you available for a quick call? He said, nothing about calls is quick. A developer pushed code with a message, temporary fix. That code stayed in production for 4 years. A coder opened a very old file. At the top it said, last updated, 2013. He whispered, "This is an ancient relic." A developer tried, switching from Mac to Windows. He lasted 2 hours, then quietly switched back. A programmer wrote a try-catch block around everything. It didn't fix the bug, but it did fix his mood. A coder tried, explaining to a non-tech friend why the server crashed. He said, "Imagine a house of cards and someone sneezed." A developer got a message from the product team saying, "Can we make a small change?" He replied, "Small for who?" A programmer had an existential crisis after reading his own code from last year. He said, "Was I okay back then?" A dev accidentally pushed debug prints into production. Customers started seeing, "Hello, I am inside the loop" in the logs. He said, "I regret everything." A programmer tried to deploy on a Friday. The universe trembled. Coworkers whispered prayers. He clicked deploy, then closed his laptop and ran away. A coder used a random Stack Overflow answer without understanding it. It worked perfectly. He said, "I am unstoppable." A programmer renamed one variable. The entire application refused to start. He said, "How is this possible? It had one job." A dev said, "I'll test this later." Later arrived. He didn't test it. A programmer said, "We need better documentation." Everyone agreed. No one wrote anything. A developer tried switching to Linux. He spent a whole day installing drivers. He said, "I understand things now, terrible things." A coder forgot to save his file before running it. He spent 20 minutes debugging code that didn't exist yet. He said, "This is peak developer behavior." A programmer tried to fix a race condition. He added delays. Nothing improved. He added logs. Everything got worse. He said, "Concurrency is black magic." A dev was asked to estimate how long a task would take. He said, "Anywhere between 5 minutes and 3 days." A programmer accidentally sent a meme to his team lead instead of his coworker. The meme said, "Meetings are a waste of time." The team lead replied, "Let's discuss this in our next meeting." He died inside. A coder went to bed knowing his code didn't work. He woke up with the solution randomly in his head. He said, "Sleep is the real debugger." A developer said, "My code is like my handwriting." "What do you mean?" "No one can read it, including me." A programmer was asked, "Did you test edge cases?" He said, "I don't have edges in my life." A developer built a feature. The product team said, "We love it. Can you also make it do the opposite?" He said, "What do you mean the opposite?" A coder added one print statement. The code started working perfectly. He said, "The bugs fear observation." A programmer saw a coworker typing without looking at the keyboard. He said, "You are a wizard." A developer said, "I'm almost done." This was 3 days ago. He is still almost done. A programmer opened his browser to research something. 2 hours later, he was watching raccoon videos. He said, "How did I get here?" A developer tried to upgrade his operating system. The update froze at 87% for 20 minutes. He stared at it like he was watching a hostage situation. Then it jumped straight to 100% and rebooted without warning. He whispered, "I aged during this." A programmer was asked to write tests. He said, "My code is already tested." His manager asked, "By who?" He said, "By fate." A junior developer asked the team, "What's the difference between staging and production?" The whole team froze. Finally, someone said, "Consequences." A coder ordered a drink at a cafe. The barista said, "Do you want your receipt?" The coder said, "Yes, I need documentation." The barista nodded slowly, like meeting a strange new species. A programmer bought a whiteboard to plan his week. He wrote one task on it, then erased it, then rewrote it 3 different ways. He didn't complete anything. But the whiteboard looked very productive. A developer opened a code file and saw a comment that said, "If you are reading this, run." He closed the file immediately. A programmer tried to pair program with his cat. The cat sat on the keyboard and typed. The programmer said, "Honestly, that's still cleaner than some legacy code." A dev found a bug no one else could reproduce. It haunted him for 3 days. He finally fixed it by accident and refused to explain how. He said, "I will take this mystery to my grave." A coder tried explaining REST APIs to a non-tech friend. After 5 minutes, the friend said, "So, it's like ordering pizza." The coder said, "Actually, yes." They both felt smarter. A programmer saw a complaint from a user saying, "The app is slow." He asked, "How slow?" The user said, "Slower than my grandma." The programmer said, "That is not a metric." A developer went to a hackathon. He brought snacks, coffee, headphones, chargers, and forgot his laptop. He said, "I have failed my ancestors." A programmer tried using Vim for the first time. He couldn't exit. He couldn't save. He couldn't escape. Eventually, he closed the entire terminal window. He said, "Vim is a prison." A coder thought he found a brilliant solution on Stack Overflow. He pasted it into his code and instantly broke everything. He said, "This is why trust issues exist." A developer told his manager, "We need to refactor this code." The manager said, "Why?" The developer said, "Because it scares me." A programmer changed one parameter in an API call. Suddenly, the server went silent. He said, "I angered it." A dev had a merge conflict so complicated, he considered starting a new career. He said, "Maybe I'll open a bakery." A programmer wrote a regex pattern. It worked. He fainted. Regex is dark sorcery. A coder got a message from a coworker saying, "We need to talk." He immediately assumed he broke production. Turns out the coworker just wanted lunch. He said, "Never say we need to talk unless servers are on fire." A developer installed Linux on his machine. Everything worked, except Wi-Fi, audio, video, Bluetooth, USB, and the touchpad. He said, "So basically everything." A programmer tried learning a new framework. The tutorial said, "Step 1, create a project." He typed the command and got 18 errors. He said, "Learning is pain." A dev looked at a commit labeled "Quick Fix." 700 lines were changed. He said, "Quick for who?" A coder tried explaining agile methodology to his mom. After a long explanation, she said, "So, you just talk a lot." He said, "Yes." A programmer's favorite sound is quiet. Because quiet means the servers are probably still running. A developer pushed code and immediately saw the production logs spike. He whispered, "Oh no, oh no, no, no." A coder spent 2 hours customizing his terminal theme. Then he wrote 5 lines of code and called it a productive day. A programmer tried writing a simple script for fun. 2 days later, it had 17 features and a README longer than a novel. He said, "This escalated." A dev saw a piece of code with no comments. He said, "This is either genius or a crime." A programmer was told, "This bug only happens on mobile." He sighed because he now had to test on mobile. A coder's computer froze during a Zoom call. It froze on the one weird facial expression he didn't want anyone to see. A developer said, "I'm not superstitious." But he refused to deploy on Friday. A programmer asked another programmer, "Why do bugs even exist?" The other programmer said, "Because we do." A dev read the error log and read it again and again and still understood nothing. He said, "These logs are written in ancient runes." A programmer went to lunch and came back to find his terminal still running tests. He said, "Perfect, more time to avoid responsibility." A coder tried to build a Docker container. It worked on the first try. He stared at the screen suspiciously. He said, "What trickery is this?" A developer received a code review saying, "Can you explain your thought process?" He said, "No." A programmer said, "My code is messy, but it has a good personality." A dev tried to run the project and saw the error message. Something went wrong. He said, "That's not helpful, you coward." A coder upgraded Python. All his virtual environments imploded. He said this was a mistake. A programmer refactored code for readability. Now no one could understand it, including him. He said, "I flew too close to the sun." A developer paused to think. His coworker asked, "Are you okay?" He said, "I'm in a recursive thought loop." A coder asked, "Why does this function behave differently every time?" Someone replied, "Maybe it's shy." A programmer got stuck in an infinite loop. He wasn't coding. He was thinking about why he was thinking about thinking. A developer fixed a bug at 2 a.m. He wrote a comment that said, "I don't know why this works, but it does." Future developers would never forgive him. A coder said, "Learning a new language will be fun." 3 hours later, he was Googling, "Why does this simple thing not work?" A developer created a feature flag. He forgot to enable it, then spent a day debugging. He said, "I am the bug." A developer joined a stand-up meeting. Everyone answered what they did yesterday. When it was his turn, he said, "I battled a bug for 6 hours and it survived." The team nodded respectfully. He was now a warrior. A programmer told his manager, "I need more time to finish this task." His manager asked, "How much more time?" The programmer stared at the horizon and said, "Yes." A developer bought a new mechanical keyboard and typed one line of code. The sound was glorious. He typed another line. Still glorious. He typed nothing else for an hour and just enjoyed the clicking. A programmer updated the backend, and suddenly the front end broke. The front-end dev said, "What did you do?" The backend dev said, "I merely existed." A developer wrote a TODO comment. A year later, the same developer reread it and whispered, "I failed you." A coder ordered an energy drink labeled Maximum Focus. He drank it. 15 minutes later, he was reorganizing his folders instead of coding. A programmer joined a call and forgot to mute himself. Everyone heard him say, "I hate this meeting." He froze like a statue. Someone said, "Mood." A developer asked ChatGPT, "Why isn't my code compiling?" ChatGPT said, "I don't see the code." The developer said, "Neither do I." A junior dev asked, "Why do we need version control?" Every senior dev turned their heads slowly like ghosts, remembering their past lives. Then one said, "So the darkness cannot consume us." A programmer told his friend, "I had a productive day." His version control stats showed 2 commits, adding a total of 8 characters. A coder forgot the password to his password manager. He said, "This is the worst-case scenario." A developer wrote a feature that only worked with perfect input. His teammate said, "Users will destroy this." A programmer asked why the UI was misaligned. The designer said, because you wrote CSS at 2 a.m. He said, fair. A dev ran tests in the terminal and everything passed. He pushed to the CI pipeline and everything failed. He said, the CI hates me personally. A programmer imported a library that he didn't fully understand. Later, he tried to remove it. The app refused to run. He said, it has attached itself to my soul. A coder found a line of code that simply said, do not delete. He deleted it anyway. The app collapsed instantly. He whispered, it warned me. A developer added, logging everywhere. Soon the logs were so long, they broke the log viewer. He said, I have logged too much. A programmer working from home tried to be productive. Then his cat sat on the keyboard and typed "arrrrrrr." He said, this is still better than some commits I've seen. A dev fixed a bug but didn't know why the fix worked. He deployed it anyway. Then he closed his laptop and refused to elaborate. A coder tried doing TDD, test-driven development. He wrote one test, ran it, it failed, and he said, I'm already tired. A programmer saw the message, unable to connect to server. He checked the server. It was fine. He checked the network. It was fine. He checked his soul. It was tired. A developer created a branch called Fix Everything. He fixed nothing. A coder asked a teammate, why doesn't this request return data? The teammate said, did you check the URL? He said, of course, I checked the URL. He had not checked the URL. A programmer tried to name a variable. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed. He finally named it. He said, good enough. A developer created a function that was so long it needed its own table of contents. His teammate said, this isn't a function, it's a novel. A coder tried using a GUI tool for Git. It confused him more than the terminal. He said, I was happier before I knew this existed. A programmer was asked what he accomplished today. He said, I prevented myself from making things worse. A developer saw a critical bug assigned to him. He pretended not to see it. But the bug saw him. A coder wrote a comment, this is temporary. Everyone knew it was permanent. A programmer tried to deploy at 4 p.m. His coworker yelled, are you insane? A developer ran a script that printed unknown error. He said, unknown to who? A coder used AI to write documentation. The AI wrote, this function does something. He said, honestly, same. A programmer said, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. He returned 45 minutes later holding snacks he didn't remember buying. A developer added a new feature and broke 3 old ones. He said, this is legacy revenge. A coder opened the task manager and saw the CPU at 100%. He whispered, I'm sorry for everything. A programmer looked at a job posting requiring 15 years of experience with a framework created last year. He said, yes, time travel. A developer asked, why is production down? Someone replied, because you deployed. A programmer tried using AI autocomplete. The AI kept suggesting nonsense. He said, stop guessing. The AI said, no. A developer opened an old project and the terminal printed warnings like, deprecated, deprecated, deprecated. He said, so is my life. A coder said, I'll optimize this later. Later never came. A developer fixed a bug and commented, this should hold for now. It did not. A programmer copied code from Stack Overflow and forgot to remove the part that said, not tested. It made it to production. He said, oops. A developer opened a ticket titled Simple Bug. He should have known right then that nothing simple was coming. 3 hours later, he renamed the ticket to Complex Nightmare. A programmer tried to explain cloud computing to his dad. He said, "It's like your files live somewhere else." His dad said, "Where?" The programmer said, "In the cloud." His dad stared at the sky. A coder was asked why a feature wasn't done. He said, "Because I underestimated my ability to overestimate my ability." A developer tried writing documentation at the end of the project. He opened a blank page, stared at it for 10 minutes, then typed, "This code exists." A programmer went to fix one line of code. Instead, he changed 47 lines, added 2 functions, removed 3 files, and broke deployment. He said, "I don't know what happened." A junior developer said, "I just want to understand everything." The senior developer laughed for 3 minutes straight. A coder tried pair programming with AI. The AI suggested a loop, inside another loop. The coder said, "That will crash everything." The AI said, "But it looks so clean." A programmer tried to use a new code formatter. It reformatted his entire project. Git showed 9,000 changed lines. He said, "I can't commit this, I'll get fired." A developer tried to do a quick hotfix on production. He typed one command wrong and deployed to the wrong environment. He said, "I am the danger." A programmer saw a commit message that said final fix really final. He knew instantly. Things had gone very wrong. A coder ran the linter and it showed 214 warnings. He said, "If I ignore them, they cease to exist." A developer said, "This is a small change." The CI pipeline disagreed violently. A programmer pushed code at midnight. The next morning, he pretended not to remember. A dev found a function named handle everything and refused to open it. He said, "I don't want to see evil today." A programmer was asked, "What's your backup strategy?" He said, "Hope." A developer ran a migration script on the wrong database. He immediately closed his laptop like shutting the lid would reverse time. A coder said, "I'll just Google this error." Google responded, "No results found." He whispered, This is how legends begin." A programmer lost Wi-Fi during a deploy. He panicked like the world was ending. A dev found code that said, "Do not edit this unless you know exactly what you're doing." He edited it anyway. He did not know what he was doing. Chaos followed. A coder listened to lo-fi music, drank coffee, opened his editor, and did absolutely nothing for an hour. He said, "At least the vibes were strong." A programmer said, "My code is perfectly optimized." His machine overheated and shut down instantly. A developer tried to fix a memory leak. He ended up creating 3 more. He said, "Leaks have leaks." A coder asked why the build was taking so long. Someone said, "Because it hates us." A programmer's mom asked, "So what do you actually do at work?" He replied, "Mostly suffer." A developer wrote a function so long that the scroll bar turned into a tiny dot. He said, "I have made a mistake." A coder forgot to push his commits. Then he lost his laptop battery. He stared into the void. He whispered, "Everything I loved is gone." A programmer tried using keyboard shortcuts to be more efficient. 2 seconds later, he accidentally closed everything. A developer said, "This code is perfectly safe." The tester said, "Challenge accepted." A coder didn't understand the architecture diagram. He shrugged and said, "I'll learn by breaking things." A programmer saw a tutorial that began with first, install Rust. He closed the tutorial. A developer tried to test the API locally. It connected to production instead. He said, I prefer not to talk about what happened next. A coder asked, why is this page loading so slowly? Someone replied, because you wrote it. He said, I deserved that. A programmer tried one more trick to fix his bug. It worked. He said, I am a god. Then another bug appeared. I take it back. A dev ran a search through the codebase and found a comment from 2014 saying, TODO, fix this tomorrow. He whispered, tomorrow never came. A programmer said, I'll stay focused today. Then spent an hour customizing his terminal theme and changing fonts. A developer upgraded NPM packages. His entire project exploded into dependency errors. He said, I just wanted one update. 1. A coder spilled coffee on his keyboard. The keyboard survived. He did not. A programmer saw a variable named temp22 new. He felt physical pain. A developer said, this will take 5 minutes. It took 5 hours. He said, time is a lie. A coder finally fixed a bug. He proudly announced it to the team. Then production crashed. He said, correlation is not causation, right? A programmer attempted to understand Kubernetes. He read one paragraph and said, not today. A developer used console.log as a debugging tool. He added so many logs, the browser lagged. He said, maybe this is too many logs. A coder reviewed a PR with 500 files changed. He said, I'm not reviewing this, I choose life. A programmer said his code was self-documenting. It was not. A developer said, this bug makes no sense. The bug said, exactly. A coder finally got the build to pass. He raised his hands in victory. Then someone said, it's failing in staging. He lowered his hands in defeat. A programmer looked at his Git history. It was chaos. He closed Git and said, I don't need to know. A developer tried to be smart and wrote a clever one-liner. 6 months later, no one could understand it, including him. A coder asked his AI assistant, is my code good? The AI said, it functions. He said, that's not comforting. A programmer tried using a new JavaScript framework. Every tutorial he found was outdated. He said, why does JavaScript evolve faster than humanity? A developer tried to work from a cafe. He opened his laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi, and immediately got kicked off because the cafe router couldn't handle his Docker containers. He whispered, I am too powerful for this place. A programmer opened a JSON file that had no commas, no indentation, and no mercy. He stared at it like it was a threat. He said, who hurt you? A developer merged his branch and proudly said, all good. The moment he said that, 5 merge conflicts appeared like ghosts. He whispered, I spoke too soon. A coder found a folder named Archive. Inside it was another folder named Old Archive. Inside that was Really Old Archive. Inside that, Delete this but scared to. A programmer tried learning AI by watching a tutorial. The instructor said, this is simple. 3 seconds later, it wasn't simple. He said, you lied to me. A developer was told to make the UI more modern. So he added rounded corners. Everyone applauded. He said, amazing what shapes can do. A programmer tried using ChatGPT to explain a bug. ChatGPT said, it might be a race condition. The programmer said, it's always a race condition. A dev upgraded his libraries. Half the project stopped working. He downgraded the libraries. The other half stopped working. He said, I live in pain. A programmer sent a PR for review. The reviewer commented, "Why?" The programmer replied, "I don't know." A developer saw an error message that said, "Command failed successfully." He stared at it for a full minute, trying to understand the paradox. A coder tried to fix a performance issue. He optimized one function, but the issue moved somewhere else. He said, "It is migrating." A programmer was asked to estimate a task. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and said, "Somewhere between 2 hours and 24 years." A developer added a dark mode toggle. The toggle worked, but everything turned neon green. He said, "This is Shrek mode." A coder saw someone using a mouse to program. He said, "I respect your courage." A programmer wrote a comment that said, "Do not touch, mysterious crash happens." Everyone touched it anyway. The crash happened. The programmer said, "I warned you." A developer asked why the tests weren't running. Someone said, "Because we don't have tests." He cried. A coder's laptop fan turned into a jet engine whenever he opened Chrome. He said, "Chrome hungers for power." A programmer found a bug that only happened when you clicked a button 3 times, waited 4 seconds, clicked again, and tilted your head slightly. He said, "Why does this bug require choreography?" A developer spent 2 hours debugging a problem. Eventually, he realized he forgot to save the file. He yelled into the void. A coder joined a new company, opened the codebase, and instantly understood why they were hiring. A programmer tried writing comments in the code. He wrote one comment. Then he said, "Good enough." A developer was asked why the build takes so long. He said, "It is contemplating existence." A coder got an email that said, "Your code has been reviewed." He opened it slowly, like defusing a bomb. A programmer used ChatGPT to generate regex. It worked perfectly. He said, "This is witchcraft." A developer saw an error message, "Failed to load resource, net, unknown." He said, "Same." A coder's solution worked on Linux, but not on Windows. It worked on Windows, but not on Mac. It worked on Mac, but not in Docker. He said, "Why does the universe hate me?" A programmer said he'd write clean code tomorrow. Tomorrow has not arrived yet. A dev created a pull request with the comment, "I hope this doesn't break anything." It broke everything. A coder accidentally hit reply all on an email to the entire company. He shut his laptop and started updating his resume. A programmer asked his AI assistant to refactor a function. The AI refactored the whole file instead. The programmer said, "You got too excited." A developer named a variable temp. 10 years later, it was still named temp. It had become permanent. A coder tried learning machine learning. He read the first paragraph of a tutorial and immediately needed a nap. A programmer looked at the Jira board and whispered, "There are too many tiles." A developer added logging to find a bug. The logs filled the terminal until nothing was readable. He said, "I have overdone it." A coder opened Slack and had 300 unread messages. He closed Slack. Problem solved. A programmer ran the build and got the message. Build succeeded with 49 warnings. He said, "A win is a win." A dev unplugged the wrong cable in the server room. Lights flickered. Alarms beeped. He whispered, "I was never here." A programmer installed Linux on an old laptop. It immediately felt faster. He said, "Linux is black magic." A coder's desk had 2 monitors, 4 empty coffee cups, and no signs of life. The code was compiling. He was waiting. A developer downloaded a 400-page PDF of documentation. He read the first page. Then he bookmarked the rest for later. Later never came. A programmer used AI to write a commit message. The commit message was more descriptive than the code. A coder wrote a function that only worked when he looked directly at the screen. When he looked away, it broke. He said, "The code fears my gaze." A programmer decided to clean up his repo. 20 minutes later, the repo refused to run. He said cleaning was a mistake. A developer restarted his machine. The bug disappeared. He took full credit. A programmer tried explaining binary. He said there are 10 types of people, those who understand binary and those who don't. His friend stared silently.